5. Custom family cruiser. More often than not, people are perfectly fine with purchasing a pre-built car, but there are some who like a challenge and want to design something of their very own. One of the strangest cars ever built is shrouded in mystery. Not much is known about the owner or creator of this vehicle, but it's likely that they pieced together different parts from at least 12 different models to make a fully custom family cruiser. It was discovered abandoned in an unknown spot, and it's unclear what exactly happened to it after it was originally photographed back in the 1990s. According to the website smartage.pl, this car was probably built in the 1960s in North Carolina. It seems to be the length of 2 cars put together. The front of the vehicle resembles an old-timey bus with 2 pairs of wide-set lights on each side of the small lower windshield. The top part of the vehicle seems to be melded onto the roof of the car, which looks like the upper part of a submarine, peeking out of the water. With only one door on the right side of this elongated car, it's definitely a fire hazard. Even the windows are too small, no one would be able to pass through them. This may be one of the reasons the owner abandoned it in the woods, but nobody can say for sure. On the inside of this Franken vehicle, you can get a clearer picture of how it was built. Various parts and pieces seem to be welded together, and it seems like the interior was completely stripped to make a bigger carriage for more passengers. But this car would never be allowed on the road today since it clearly violates safety requirements. The owner created this car to drive from the top, so in order to steer, you'd have to peek out of the upper windshield like you're on the bridge of the Star Trek Enterprise, which doesn't give much visibility at all. There's no seatbelt in sight, and you'd have a really hard time trying to see the cars in front or behind you. Apparently, a user on Facebook, Eddie Ward, remembered seeing this car being hauled behind a wrecker one day in Denver, North Carolina. But there's no record of it online, and it can't be confirmed if this thing was ever actually destroyed. For all anyone knows, it could have been purchased by some eccentric collector, or it very well may have been stripped down for parts. 4. Honda Fourier Joe. The Honda Motor Company is well known for making some of the most reliable cars on the market. Certain vehicles like the 2005 Accord Hybrid or the 2017 Honda Odyssey will most likely be around for another decade or so. But along with these, the company has created some interesting concept cars that'll never see the light of day on the road. One such model was on display in 1999. It's called the Honda Fourier Joe. Interestingly enough, it was specifically marketed towards party animals. Fourier Joe translates from Japanese to Sleepless City, and it was originally shown at the Tokyo Motor Show. It was definitely a risky concept, and due to its lack of practicality, it was never fully put into production. But it was designed to appeal to the youth clubbing market and was retrofitted with all sorts of unique features, sort of like a miniature party bus. The vehicle was made thinking that its passengers would be able to stand while being transported. The roof was very tall, which allowed riders to dance their way to their destination. The interior boasted a distinct club-like theme, and the dashboard resembled a DJ's mixing desk from the late 1990s. Even the steering wheel looked like a turntable, and there was an insane sound system included in this bad boy. Each door had 2 giant speakers built into them that would likely give the riders a full surround sound listening experience. The vehicle had 2 rows of 2 seats which sat on top of what seemed like stripper poles, kind of like fancy bar stools. The exterior was iridescent and purple, which only added to the nightlife design, and the front shield wrapped around the top of the car like a Tesla Model X. Even though many car magazines described the design as weird, there were some later models put into production that were based on the vehicle with a similar shape. In the end, the Fourier Joe didn't gain much traction in the automobile industry, but Honda continues to work on projects that stray from the boring norm of everyday cars. Would you rather have a car you could dance in or a car you could sleep peacefully in? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. 3. Volkswagen Peacock. Like something straight out of a video game or Dr. Seuss book, the Volkswagen Peacock was first shown to the public back in 2005. Its striking green paint job and oddly shaped circular design made this vehicle truly one of a kind. It was originally made to be featured in a Bird's Eye Peas commercial in order to advertise their product and promote healthy eating habits. This makes sense, since it looks exactly like a giant pea with wheels. You can tell right away that this thing is made by Volkswagen thanks to its trademark lights. You may be wondering, where can I get one of these cars? But you most likely wouldn't want to drive this on the road. The company Asylum, based in London, was responsible for manufacturing this vehicle, and it only took a total of 6 weeks to finish it, which isn't really a great sign. The Peacock can only go a maximum speed of 60 miles per hour, and that's because they really only built this car to be in the commercial. There were no gears, and the base was taken from an off-road go-kart. It was then combined with a Honda's engine, and the lights were used from a Volkswagen Beetle to give it the company's signature look. Everything else needed to create this unique car came from a specialist shop, and parts were made to order. Another major reason you wouldn't want to own this automobile is that it was literally designed to fall apart. According to Hotcars.com, 12 panels on the vehicle were constructed with disassembly as their main goal. The exhaust pipe, doors, hubcap, sunroof, rear bumper, and wing mirrors were all meant to fall off the car during the filming of the commercial. So it's not exactly something you'd want to drive down the highway. If somehow you were able to get a Peacock, it would not be street legal, so you wouldn't be able to drive it. But you could keep it as a collector's item and have it on display for fun. 2. Layat Helica. The 1921 Layat Helica looks like something you'd find in an alternate reality. Instead of a smooth hood like you see on most cars today, this vehicle had a giant propeller placed directly in front of the driver's seat. Only 30 cars were ever made with this design, and the inventor responsible for such a unique mode of transportation was Marcel Layat, a biplane engineer from France. He started tinkering with car designs just before World War I began, and he believed the aviation world could teach a thing or two to the engineers designing cars. Layat thought that early vehicle designs were way too bulky and aerodynamically inefficient. He also thought that driven wheels siphoned power and needed way too many parts, which was needlessly complex in his opinion. Luckily, these were all issues he'd been working to solve over the years while designing planes, and he took it as a challenge to create something the world had never seen before. Aircrafts were already made to be as lightweight and aerodynamic as possible, so he thought he could play on that and basically make a wingless plane meant for the road. Towards the beginning of the automotive industry, all sorts of new technology was under development, but everything was pretty much hit or miss. Nobody before Layat ever considered combining features from a car and an airplane though. In his first model, a lightweight 550-pound wooden body was retrofitted with an 18-horsepower Harley-Davidson V-twin engine. Layat wanted his design to extract motion from the power of the engine efficiently, and so a large propeller was added to the front of the car. In 1927, another model of this flightless plane got up to speeds of 106 miles per hour, which was hard to beat at the time. But even though the Layat Helica oozed creativity and individuality, it was truly an awful idea from the start. There's no denying that Layat could have been onto something with his design, but the execution of his car was the problem. Imagine you're driving one of these things down the street and then all of a sudden someone walks in front of you. You have a giant propeller mounted in the front of the car that makes a sort of a mini vacuum. The pedestrian would likely be sucked into the rotating blades, which would then shower you and your passengers with body parts. The propeller would also likely block most of the front view for the driver, making it extremely dangerous for the road. The Layat Helica had only 3 wheels, 2 in the front and 1 in the back. The cab of the car was shaped more like a plane, with the front of the vehicle being wider and it being more narrow towards the back. This was done because the normal steering mechanism was replaced by a cable-operated rear-wheel steering system, and that worked by throwing the backside of the car sideways to get the vehicle to turn one way or the other. Even if the driver was going really slow into a turn, the back wheel always lifted slightly off the ground, and the front wheels would wobble like a toy car from the 90s. As interesting as his design was, Marcel Layat failed to convince the general public that the propeller-driven car was the vehicle of the future. 1. Amphicar. Manufactured in West Germany, the Amphicar Model 770 was first launched back in 1961 and was put on display for the public at the New York Auto Show. As you might have guessed from the name, its design let it operate on land and water. But it didn't seem to do so well in sales, and production stopped completely a few years later in 1965. Hans Trippel was the creator of this amphibious car, and only 3,878 of them were ever produced. It was a descendant of the Volkswagen Schwimmwagen, which translates to swimming car from German, but it was made for the general public, not the military. From the outside, it looked exactly like a normal car from the 1960s. Its wheels were low set, and it stood well above ground level when it was on dry land. The windshield was slightly curved, and it boasted a foldable top, similar to a modern-day convertible. Mounted under the rear bumper were 2 propellers that let the vehicle maneuver in water, but the whole thing was made entirely out of mild steel. This was ineffective, since every time it operated in the water it needed to be thoroughly greased to stop permanent damage and rusting. There were 13 points in total that required greasing, and in order to reach one of those points, the backseat had to be removed completely, which was a total pain in the rear. The car only offered modest performance at best on and off dry land, and that didn't go over well with the public when there were so many other options to choose from at the time. The standard SC engine was mounted in the back of the Amphicar, and once it was in the water, it would control the propellers too. When the driver engaged the second gear lever, it allowed the car to drive forward or in reverse. If used in the water, it could reach speeds of up to 7 knots, around 8 miles per hour or 13 kilometers per hour, and on land 70 miles per hour was its top speed, which isn't all that impressive. The idea behind this car was revolutionary at the time, but it was more of a gimmick purchase. One person that bought the car said, "It's not a good car and it's not a good boat," while another was quoted saying, "We like to think of it as the fastest car on the water and the fastest boat on the road." "Like to think" is the key phrase there. The bilge pump, which is responsible for removing water from the bottom of the undercarriage, was extremely ineffective, and the vehicle's ability to float was hindered thanks to this. The pump was prone to leakage and could be dangerous if it wasn't well maintained. If you were out on the water and got a leak, you were most likely going to have to swim back to shore, unless you wanted to sink with your Amphicar like a captain going down with his ship. Even though the car had many design flaws, it's interesting to note that 2 of them successfully made their way down the Yukon River in Alaska back in 1965. And in September that same year, another 2 navigated the English Channel. These cars also made appearances in films between 1965 and 2016. And one of the most notable owners of these Amphicars was US President Lyndon B. Johnson. The former president was a known prankster who would often trick visitors by speeding downhill towards his property's lake while shouting about malfunctioning brakes. The passengers in the car would not be aware of the vehicle's amphibious nature, and he would then pretend to crash into the water while they were terrified. Which one of these strange vehicles was your favorite? Would you ever drive one of them? Let us know in the comments below and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye!